Let's build a 40k SPM vanilla monolithic bus base. For real though, spiders on, no ore spawning, and just quality of life mods. For cinema. Last time, we built a base that'll build a base that'll build a base, aka the starter base, which merely produced 60 SPM, but this got us through all of the non-space science research.
Research is done! That one's been in buff for years!
Last time we built the base that'll build the base, aka the 461 blue belt mid-game base. Some might even call it a mega base in its own right, as this section is dedicated to producing 700,000 tier 3 modules, which at our current rate would take 2.7 days. This is our 362 Knuclear Sandwich reactor, which is providing power to our blue belt builder, which will take 3.4 days to reach the 26 million blue belt target. And of course we're going to need 10 million solar panels and 8 million accumulators. This is the solar panel build. And over here is the steel and more steel required to produce all these solar panels in 1.3 days. And the accumulators are over here at 8 million in 1.4 days. In the center here we have the radioactive mega dump, which is just the dumping site for all of these products we're producing. This was the original starter base, which is still currently being used to produce all of the other miscellaneous stuff. And of course, up here, we have the 4-core SPU, producing about 4k SPM. And in order to reach our science target, we need to run this for somewhere between 1.6 days and 22.25 days. To keep track of all of this, I made a report card for a mid-game base. And here you can see that for the major builds, the raw resources in terms of blue belts add up to 461. But this doesn't include all of the other minor builds like 20 million dirt.
When you look at this dirt, you may just see filth. But here at SipsCo, we see potential. For quality products at dirt cheap prices, think SipsCo.
Or 2 million explosive rockets. Or the spicy rock production, because if you didn't know, the box is everything. Oh yeah, and all of this is temporary. We haven't built a single piece of the final build yet. Which brings us to today. We're finally gonna build the base's foundation.
Are you here to kill us?
Negative. Thank you for your patience. I am ready to enhance your lives with integrated multi-phase task accomplishment.
Today's goal is to kill 1.7 million bugs, 349,000 worms, 357,000 spawners, and to destroy 93,000 rocks, 203,000 cliffs, 5.8 million trees, or I should say 10 million boxes, because remember, the box is everything. We're also going to have to fill in 52 million water tiles with dirt, and then pave the entire factory floor with 136 million tiles of concrete, as well as placing down a measly 10.3 million solar panels and 8.9 million accumulators. So how are we going to accomplish this? SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, does whatever a SpiderTrain does. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, does whatever a SpiderTrain does. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, do 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 do. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, what can't you do for me? Do 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 do. A SpiderTrain is simply a spider following a spider following a spider following a spider following a spider. And in this case, the SpiderTrain is composed of 33 spiders long. And of course, we have 4 of these SpiderTrains, bringing the total spider count to 132. Their purpose is to terraform the world into a parking lot of solar panels and accumulators. In the context of combat, we had previously discussed the use of SpiderTrains. The main benefit being that you can control many spiders, in this case 32, with just one remote. However, there were a bunch of cons. Due to the II spider pipeline, all attacks target the lead Spidertron, which is bad. And inversely, due to the bomb to II pipeline, the first following Spidertron can have supporting fire. However, the third and however many other Spidertrons are too far out of range to actually do anything at all, which makes SpiderTrains really ineffective and most importantly, not scalable in combat situations. However, we can reevaluate the SpiderTrain for building applications. Say we pasted down a blueprint in this blue area, and the green area represents the RoboPort range of each individual Spidertron. We get to retain the good of a simple control schema, as we can just tell the first Spidertron to move across the entire blueprint, and all of the following Spidertrons will follow it. Another important side effect of this is that each individual Spidertron gets a chance to work on the blueprint, meaning that you can in fact scale up SpiderTrains to an arbitrarily large value, which is really good when working on mega bases. But also importantly, we can give each Spidertron a specific job to complete, and we can specify the order in which we want those jobs to be completed by the order of spiders in the SpiderTrain. The other piece of the puzzle is the blueprint itself, as in order for the SpiderTrain to complete the blueprint, the width of the blueprint must be smaller than the width of the RoboPort coverage. However, it is the complete opposite for the length of the blueprint, as the longer the blueprint, the more the SpiderTrain can accomplish with fewer inputs. Some might even say bigger is better. Okay, now that we have a basic understanding of SpiderTrains, let's actually start the process of terraforming, which first means placing down the 36 by 8,640 long blueprint containing about 25,000 solar panels, along with 21,000 accumulators and 1,000 substations. And then just with one click, send the SpiderTrain to go across the entire blueprint, and do the same for the second SpiderTrain, which means, in theory, all we have to do is wait 22.5 minutes, and we will have placed down 50,000 solar panels. So let's wait. does it even work? Is it even working? Because it kind of doesn't look like it's working because we're skipping a lot of ghost placements. That's what all these purple boxes are. And we're missing a lot of power poles, and we didn't place anything over the landfill area. And they got stuck a few times, and it's really slow, and all in all, it's kind of hard to tell what's happening. And it's pretty unclear of whether this is good, actually. Okay, so there's a lot more details we have to go over about the SpiderTrain, and it would be helpful to imagine the world as a pizza pie.
Mamma and Papa Briccolini will not cook you no linguine. Don't you know we specialize in one thing, that's the pizza pie.
The problem is, this pizza pie is infested with bugs and worms, with a sprinkling of rocks and wood on top, with puddles of water everywhere. And this is no good on pizza, as well as land that we're trying to pave with solar panels, so it all has to be cleaned up. The first step is to debug and deworm the pizza, and I've already been doing this with the RTS attack clusters. That's enough space to start with. And now, since the enemies have been cleared, the SpiderTrain can start working on the land. And the first 4 spiders are dedicated to removal. The removal crew takes things from the land and places them into their inventory. This means picking up all the trees, all the rocks, which can contain coal, as well as all the loose stone on the ground. 1 inventory slot must be dedicated to construction robots, but the other 99, that is 79 in the inventory and 20 in the trash, are left empty, which means each spider can hold up to 9,900 wood, which is not nearly enough, so we need at least 4 of them. After the removal process is complete, we then have to do the inverse of the addition process. That is, adding things to the landscape to flatten it. Primarily, this means adding landfill to water, as each one of these Spidertrons hold 7,700 landfill, which is 3 boxes less than the max capacity of a Spidertron. Obviously, 1 slot is for robots, but confusingly, destroying cliffs is also part of the addition process, as logistically, we're adding a cliff explosive to the cliff in order to destroy it, but when the cliff is destroyed, we don't have to pick up any stone or dirt, which means logistically we're not actually removing anything. And finally, the 3rd slot is left empty. This is an important feature you'll see on every single Spidertron I set up, as any bot network with construction robots in it can be assigned to deconstruct things, but not every bot network has room to store the thing that it deconstructed, as even if it's marked for trash, the item cannot directly go from bot to trash, it has to go from bot to inventory to trash. So by always leaving at least 1 empty slot, it's an insurance policy not to just completely gum up the system. Okay, so far we've dewormed the land, and then we did our cut and our fill, which means now we get to finally pave the land. So the first paver only carries substations. We only need about 1,000 of these. There are some additional cliff explosives, just in case there's a really dense patch that we go through. Then comes the solar panel pavers. Each one of these can hold 3,850 solar panels. And there's 7 of these, meaning that a full train can put down 26,950 solar panels. And then there's 6 accumulator Spidertrons. Each of these also carry 3,850 accumulators, putting the total at 23,100. So for the paving section, we just need substations, solar panels, and accumulators. But then there's one more section to the SpiderTrain, and that is the cleanup section. This section only repeats some of the earlier actions, but it gives the SpiderTrain a second chance at completing the operation. So we have 2 more additions, which is just basically landfill. And then we have a caboose, which just has a bit of everything from the entire process, just as like the final last chance to possibly fulfill the ghost request. So that's the composition and ordering of a SpiderTrain. After you remove the biters, you do your cut, you do your fill, your paving, and then your cleanup operation. That comes out to 33 spiders per train, and then we have 4 trains. On the first run, we had just sent 2 SpiderTrains up, which means now we can send trains number 3 and 4 up, while the SpiderTrains number 1 and 2 get to rest, as at any given moment, we can only have 2 SpiderTrains running, which means if we want a 100% uptime, we need 4 SpiderTrains in total. This begs the question, why can we only have 2 running at once? Well, this is a bit complicated. This is due to the SpiderTrain Exploration Expedition Limit, or STEAL for short, as this encapsulates the speed limit of any individual SpiderTrain, what I like to call the expedition limit, but it also encapsulates the speed limit of all active SpiderTrains, which I like to call the exploration limit. So the first part is the expedition limit, or the speed limit of the individual, which is a function of the number of exoskeletons. That is, your top speed, or your limit, is determined by the number of exoskeletons you have equipped, which is between 0 and 3, because there's no realistic way to set this up with just using solar panels, so you need at least 1 fusion reactor, which means you're limited to at most 3 exoskeletons. And importantly, in the Mark 1 setup here, there are 0 exoskeletons. That's right, it has the lowest possible individual speed. In contrast, the exploration limit is a little bit more complicated, as it's a function of wingspan. So here we have the center blue column, which represents the width of the blueprint. And then we have all these green boxes, which represents the construction area of each individual Spidertron in the SpiderTrain. And these are variable, however, all of them are greater than or equal to the width of the blueprint, which brings us to the magenta wings on each side, which represents the width of the construction area that is greater than the width of the blueprint. And that's what wingspan is. This means it is a function of the fatness of the SpiderTrain, where the skinniest possible SpiderTrain only has 1 spider following, where a fat SpiderTrain has multiple spiders following 1 spider. Fatter SpiderTrains naturally have larger wingspans, which generally means skinnier SpiderTrains are better. Wingspan is also a function of randomness. This predates quality. Wingspan is also a function of the roboport to bot ratio. For all of the spiders except for the caboose, we use 4 roboports, and in the caboose we use 6 roboports. So the number of personal roboports is static, and this static count determines the max supported robot count, and the construction area width, and the number of charging ports available. However, we don't have to supply the spider with the max number of robots, and in fact, through empirical testing, it's never best to supply the max number of robots to the spider. This makes the robot count variable per spider, as it's actually a function of the ghost to bot pipeline, as well as the blueprint that I'm pasting down. So all that combined gets factored into the SpiderTrain Exploration Expedition limit. Is there any questions about this? No questions? Fantastic. The innermost parenthesis, the center of this all, is the ghost to bot pipeline and the blueprint itself. So it's finally time for me to explain what the blueprint actually is.
Just warped it in. Now that's some fancy tech, huh?
But first, SpiderTrain number 3 and 4 have completed their initial run up, but they also ran into the same issues as number 1 and 2, where they were unable to place solar panels on top of the landfill, because in 1.1 you can either place landfill or you can place things on top of landfill, but you can't do both in one action. And then they also just skipped over a bunch of ghosts themselves, leading to a bunch of missing solar panels and substations and accumulators. The solution to this is that we just paste the blueprint over it again, and then just send them down the exact same path. This way they get a chance to place things on top of the landfill, and as long as they placed at least 50% of the buildings on the way up, they should be able to place the other 50% on the way down. However, there's a glaring asterisk here in that there is no guarantee. You see, most solar blueprints are based around the RoboPort size, because that's how the blueprints are going to be built. However, instead of RoboPorts, we're using SpiderTrains. We don't have to base the blueprint around the RoboPort. Instead, we base it around the substation. This brings the standard block size to 36 by 36, which covers an area of 1,296 tiles. And then on top of that, this gets 100% filled in with 104 solar panels and 86 accumulators at a ratio of 0.869, which I think is close enough to the perfect ratio of 0.8467. And then we take 240 of these and then stack them into a single column. This results in 24,960 solar panels in every single column, which means in order to reach 1 million solar panels, I need to warp in 40 columns. Or in other words, each SpiderTrain has to place down 10 full columns. And our goal is 10x that at 10 million solar panels.
Can't follow that command.
What happened here? Oh, it looks like half the SpiderTrain got stuck and left behind. I'll have to send the front half back to rescue the back half.
That command is unacceptable.
And then the front half got stuck. The rescue operation needs a rescue operation. Meanwhile, SpiderTrain number 1 has almost completed its first lap going up and then down, which means it needs to go to the pit stop next, as the fully loaded SpiderTrain only carries the supplies for 1 column, or I should say, it almost carries a column's worth of supplies. There are 14 Spidertrons carrying landfill, which means it only holds about 100,000 landfill. Yet a column is composed of 240 standard blocks, making it a little bit larger than 300,000 tiles. I'm sure there'll never be a pizza slice that's more than 33% wet. Anyways, the pit stop is basically just a whole bunch of RoboPorts and a point-to-point train stop connected to the radioactive megadump. All the required resources are trained in, and wood and coal are trained out. However, the stone is transformed on-site into landfill because it's a real simple recipe. And by now, SpiderTrain number 2 has completed a lap and is coming in for a pit stop. Construction cluster meet SpiderTrain 1, SpiderTrain 1 meet construction cluster SpiderTrain 2. SpiderTrain 2 meet concussion cluster. And I'm sure SpiderTrain 1 and 2, you've already met each other. So yeah, that's all the permutations. So this shouldn't be awkward anymore. Now we can send SpiderTrain number 3 and 4 down. The pit stop doesn't have to be particularly fast, as SpiderTrains 1 and 2 don't have to go up again until SpiderTrains number 3 and 4 make it all the way down. But this kind of leads the question,
how long can this go on? How long can this go on? How long can this go on?
Because there's quite a few solar panels to be placed down yet. As right now I'd say we're about 0.5% of the way done. Oh no. What did I sign myself up for? Well, earlier I had made the estimate. In theory, all we have to do is wait 22.5 minutes, and we will have placed down 50,000 solar panels. We now have enough information to understand where this number came from. 50,000 solar panels means that a SpiderTrain made a full trip up and then a full trip down. The total tiles traversed would be 36 times 240 times 2, or the standard block size times the number of standard blocks times the number of columns. And from the wiki, we can see that a 0 exoskeleton Spidertron traverses at about 46 kilometers per hour. convert to minutes, convert to meters, convert to tiles. In Factorio, 1 meter is 1 tile. So then this comes out to 22.5 minutes. Is the theoretical time it should take to complete 1 lap. In other words, the SpiderTrains should be able to place down 2,222 solar panels per minute. And this is a stat we can check up against the building tab. And we're not ever reaching anything even close to that, as this hour averaged out at 1.1k solar panels per minute, which is almost exactly half. So how long is this going to take? If our target is 10 million solar panels, the theoretical minimum is 3.1 days. However, we know that we're not going to hit the theoretical minimum, and in fact, the measured minimum almost doubles this time, meaning it would take 6.3 days to place all 10 million solar panels. However, I am not an AI agent. I am in fact a human, and I enjoy doing human things like eating and sleeping and doing the repetitive task of placing down 10 million solar panels in a video game. Which means that I'm only going to spend at most 50% of the day on this, which means the minimum time would be 12.6 days. However, instead of just staring at solar panels being built for the next 2 weeks, I have to do something to keep the dopamine flowing. But I am a millennial, except that the roles are reversed because Factorio is meant to be going on in the background. And in the foreground is something a little more engaging. As the big idea here was that by using large blueprints, you can semi-automate the construction process. Because with a large blueprint, you can paste it down and then tab out for 10-15 minutes, thus taking no actions. But then in between deaths or games, you can tab back into Factorio and paste down another column and then tab out again. The bigger the blueprint, the less actions you have to perform, which means it becomes more automated. For example, if I just made the blueprint size 1 standard block, for every column, I'd have to paste down the blueprint 240 times, and then I have to move the SpiderTrain 240 times. Whereas with the long SpiderTrain and the big blueprint, this is all reduced to 1 action. And that's where this whole initial idea for the SpiderTrain even came from in the first place. Bigger equals more automated. However, there is a cost, and the cost of running Factorio in the background is a frame reduction. What that frame reduction actually represents is an update reduction. And the true problem is that if you reduce the number of updates per second, you're effectively slowing down the game speed. It'll take even longer to place down all these solar panels. However, while I'm doing this, I'm going to have the map view open and zoomed all the way out. This does cost me some frames. But on top of that, I'm going to be recording at the same time. And this is also going to cost me a few more frames. Have you ever taken a jar and put some oil and some water in it and then just shaken it? What you'll see is that oil and water does not mix. And that's going to cost you. That's going to cost you another 9 frames, which brings us to a total estimated time of 21 days. Cue the speed ramp. Cue the music. Cue the time lapse. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I'll see you in 21 days. So this block is 2 million solar panels, which took me 4 real-life days to complete. However, it only really took 35 in-game hours to complete. This means the average solar panels placed per in-game minute came out to be about 925, which is lower than the expected 1.1k. Am I literally gonna spend the next month placing down solar panels? Is this really what I'm going to be doing? Because remember, we're only 20% of the way done. Oh no. Oh no. I think one of the main reasons for this discrepancy is that the 1.1k assumes 100% uptime. This assumes that the second a SpiderTrain finishes a column, the very next second I send a SpiderTrain down the next column. However, because I'm tabbed out, I'm not monitoring it all the time. This almost always results in several minute gaps in between construction runs. And then there's this massive gap after the first million were placed. This is because I had to move the pit stop closer. And I had to do a bunch of bug hunting. Which means we reach the next mega base achievement, as we currently have enough solar power to completely replace the Knuclear Sandwich. This means we can now remove the entire Knuclear Sandwich itself and recoup all of the UPS that it's hogging up. All of these entities are either producing or consuming a resource that has to be updated every cycle, compared to solar panels, where each panel is exactly the same as every other panel, which means for an arbitrary amount of solar panels, there's only ever one entity that does the actual calculations, and then it's just multiplied by the number of solar panels you have. This means you can scale up power production to an arbitrarily large size with no UPS impact, although there is the mental impact of spending an entire month placing down solar panels. The question is, how much impact does the Knuclear Sandwich have on UPS? Is this entire process worth the mental scarring in the first place? Well, we can peer into the internals of the engine by pressing F4 to open the debug menu, and then either enabling time usage or entity time usage. Here, the aptly named heat manager manages all the heat flow in the heat pipes, and this takes up about 1.15 milliseconds. In the entity list, the generator refers to any entity that generates electricity, aka the steam turbines. Any steam engines would also fall under this category, however we don't have any of those anymore, so the entire 0.42 milliseconds can be attributed to the Knuclear Sandwich. The boiler refers to entities that boil water into steam. In our case, this is the heat exchanger. However, the boiler also counts as a boiler, and we are using 24 of these for the coal liquefaction. However, 24 is just a rounding error of 2.6k. Offshore pumps refer to offshore pumps. And if we highlight over the entire base, we can see that it only has 558, so we'll attribute a proportional amount. This goes the same with pumps. There's 518 in the build, and there's 949 in the entire base. And then also the reactors are reactors, and they consume about 0.04 milliseconds. Of note, we also have the fluid manager managing the fluids, and this does cost some UPS. However, in this active base, it's too difficult for me to attribute a specific value to the Knuclear Sandwich itself and what is just the other rest of the base. This is the same for the transport lines. It is greater than 0, but I just don't know what it is. This brings the total estimated update time to about 2 milliseconds. However, the question still stands: how much impact does the Knuclear Sandwich have on UPS? As this one single sandwich takes about 2 milliseconds to update and produces about 60 gigawatts, which is comparable to 1.4 million solar panels, which take approximately 0 time to update because there are 2 active entities, 1 solar panel and 1 accumulator. The problem is that our target is 10 million solar panels, or 420 gigawatts. This means we're going to need about 7 of these. And while that first 1.4 million solar panels costs about 0, the second and the third and the fourth, etc., all of these costs exactly 0. because there are no active entities in these. Contrasted to the Knuclear Sandwich, where the first one cost about 2 milliseconds, well, the second one is going to cost about 2 milliseconds, and the third one is going to cost about 2 milliseconds. All 7 of them combined is going to cost about 14 milliseconds.
I'm in danger!
I need to put this into perspective here. The game runs at 60 updates per second, so 1 over 60 gives us 16.67 milliseconds per update. If we had to spend 14 of those 16.67 milliseconds on just the Knuclear Sandwich, on just the power production alone, we would be spending 84% of all of our updates for the entire game just on power production. So how much impact does the Knuclear Sandwich have on UPS? A lot. 84% of your entire allotted update time would have to go to the Knuclear Sandwich itself. This means that this entire process is not insane. I am not insane. There is no other option. There is no alternative. The Knuclear Sandwich has to go. What is your purpose?
Knuclear Sandwich and Knuclear Sandwich accessories.
Okay, why don't you go stand next to the Knuclear Sandwich, next to a wooden box filled with TNT, next to a line of coal, and I'll just be standing all the way over here. That should have done something. It looks like it did a little bit of something. Okay, take 2. More TNT, even closer to the reactor. At this point I've run out of fair use music tokens, but I also didn't record any sound for this section. Of note, I guess, is that this is one of the few times where the frames actually lag behind the updates. I can't imagine why. Hopefully nothing survives this, because everything that survives I have to clean up.
Put on goggles or turn away.
Oh, that can't be good at all.
But if you did have to find somewhere to survive,
Minus 15 seconds.
what do you think the best spot is?
Minus 10 seconds.
A fridge?
9, 8,
Lying on the ground?
7,
Or an underground bunker?
6,
What if the fridge was lead lined?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's a disappointing amount of destruction, as I still have to clean up everything else.
What is my purpose? What is my purpose? What is my purpose? What is my purpose? What is my purpose?
You're the deconstruction crew.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
This is also a disappointing amount of destruction. Since the turbines can only stack to 10, each spider can't hold that much. There has to be a better way. As it turns out, the safest place to survive a nuclear blast is to just lay on the ground, as items that are sitting on the ground cannot be destroyed by nukes. Obviously, lead-lined fridges are also safe from nukes. And the worst place you could be is underground, as if you nuke both ends of an underground belt, all of the items in the underground section get deleted, as opposed to the above ground sections, which are completely nuke proof. So the cleanup cluster is finishing the job, and then we get to ask the age-old question, how much impact did the nuclear sandwich have on UPS? By breaking up the sandwich into its base components, we estimated the impact to be about 2.01 milliseconds. But now that we've fully deconstructed the sandwich, we can peer back into the internals of the engine to measure what the actual impact was. The predicted row shows what we predicted these values to be post-sandwich deconstruction. For example, we expected the heat manager to go to 0 because there are no other heat pipes on the map, but we didn't expect the offshore pump to go to 0 because there are other offshore pumps. And by opening the time usage, we can see that the heat manager did go to 0. And then we can also look at the entity time usage. And in sum, we overestimated the impact by about 0.023 milliseconds. I would consider that pretty close. But you have to remember that this impact does not include the fluid manager cost, or the transport line cost, or the cost of producing the fuel, which all of these combined would probably bring the impact back up to around 2 milliseconds. So yeah, the sandwich had to go. I've put it off long enough, but now it's time to prepare the base for the next 8 million solar panels, which first means clearing out a bunch more land around the pollution cloud, so that while I'm semi-AFK, the biters don't start attacking my base. But this is starting to get really annoying to do, and to just clear the land around the pollution cloud, it took me about 10 hours. But I also need to make room for another 8 million solar panels, as the SpiderTrain relies on having the pizza dewormed and debugged before it can be paved with solar panels. And I forgot to even include this in my completion time calculation, which based on the fact that it took me about 10 hours to just clear this zone, I think it's going to take me another 4 days to clear all the area for the solar panel patch. So we can go ahead and bump this estimate up to 25 days.
Our command center's been upgraded.
The rest of the base has been running unattended for a while, and we have reached our 700,000 tier 3 modules, which means I can deconstruct the entire module build. The easiest way to do this is to deconstruct the miners, or at least mark them for deconstruction, and then let the factory run itself dry, such that when you go to actually deconstruct the factory, there's much fewer materials just sitting on the belts. By removing all of these active entities, we should be able to claw back a few updates per second, which effectively increases our solar panel placement rate. But also in the long term, we're going to have to deconstruct all of these deactivated factories for the final base in order to squeeze out every single ounce of performance possible. So why not just deconstruct it now?
Upgrade complete!
With the deconstruction complete, we can now mark the tier 3 modules as 100% done on our report card, as we've made the base, run it for 2.7 days, and then deconstructed it. Next on the list is the solar panel and accumulator builds. These finished up a long time ago, and are awaiting deconstruction.
Detected.
Enemies taking a fly swatter to our drones.
It's a little too close for comfort. Luckily, only 300 expendable drones ended up paying the price. There's all our nuke-proof items that I have to clean up.
Our upgrade has finished.
The 4-core SPU has been running in the background this whole time, and we are currently at mining prod level 130 with a target of 190. The absolute minimum required is level 96, As with 12 speed beacons, one miner is able to fully saturate a blue belt. The maximum would be 350, as a miner would require no beacons in order to fully saturate a blue belt. But to reach that level of productivity, the 4-core SPU would have to run for 22.5 days. So I picked the breakpoint of 190, as at that level, every miner only requires 4 beacons in order to fully saturate a blue belt. Or in other words, you only need 1 row of beacons, which makes it much easier to set up the thousands of outposts I'm going to have to do later. While we've already done 68% of the levels, due to the way the research scales up in cost, we've only done about 45% of the total research time, which will be 6.5 days. So the 4-core SPU will have to continue to run in the background. As far as the report card is concerned, the last major build is the 26 million blue belts, and we currently have 92% or 24 million, which means I'll only remove half of the build right now. But at this point, I'm basically just stalling, as I don't really want to spend the next month placing down solar panels. We're at the inflection point where a hobby turned into a chore. The biggest issue I really have is that the process is still quite manual. Despite the blueprint being about 9,000 tiles long, it still only takes the slowest possible speed, a 0 exoskeleton Spidertron, about 30 minutes to make it across, which means, like clockwork, every 30 minutes I gotta tab back into Factorio and repeat the process again. While that was fine for a couple of days, I don't want to do that for the next month. So before I start this process up again, I want to make some changes to make it better. The obvious candidate is to just make the blueprint bigger. As we already covered in our blueprint design, larger equals fewer actions, which equals a higher automation level. So right now the blueprint's about 9,000 tiles long. Why not just make it 100,000 tiles long and then tab in every hour or two? But why stop there? Why not have the blueprint be 1 million tiles long, or 10 million tiles long, so that I'd only ever have to do one action? So there's a lot of problems with this, like only being able to place blueprints into generated chunks, and the capacity of the SpiderTrain itself, and the fact that the world map is only 2 million by 2 million, as Dash has already proven. But there's a bigger root issue that I alluded to earlier in the Steel discussion, which is the ghost to bot pipeline. When we take a large blueprint, like the standard column that has about 50,000 entities in it, and paste it into the world, essentially what we're doing is creating a list of 50,000 ghost entities. And the goal of the ghost to bot pipeline is to link every individual ghost entity up with a bot that has the appropriate construction material. It does this by iterating across the list, and for each entity, checking whether there is an available construction bot with the appropriate material. If so, dispatching said bot. If not, just skip over it and check it again the next loop around. However, there is a problem here. And the problem is that this checking is always happening as fast as it can. For normal people, this is a good thing, because then the game feels more responsive. For insane people, like myself, this actually becomes a weakness, because what this really means is that this checking rate is fixed. So, if we were to place a larger blueprint, the ghost entity list would get larger, but the checking rate would not go any faster, because it's already going as fast as it can. The time to check any individual ghost entity goes up. It just takes longer to get to that index in the list. While it means that the bots are generally a little bit less responsive, for normal players, this still doesn't really matter, because generally you're using static roboports. Eventually, the ghost list will get to placing everything on the list. However, we're not using static roboports. We're using moving SpiderTrains. which means there's a limited window in when the SpiderTrain construction area goes over the specific blueprint that has to match up with the iteration through the loop of ghost entities.
I'm in danger!
But remember, not every Spidertron is equipped to do every single job. Some SpiderTrons only carry landfill, some only carry solar panels. We need it to line up with the specific Spidertron that has the materials to do that job. When we get larger and larger blueprints, it becomes a fleeting chance that the pipeline loop is aligned with the SpiderTrain, which is aligned with the individual specific Spidertron in the SpiderTrain that has the materials to do the job. On the axis of blueprint size, we have larger blueprints requiring fewer actions, which increases our automation level. Thus, bigger is better. But on the pipeline size, a larger blueprint increases the number of ghost entities, which slows down the process of the pipeline linking, which results in a higher defect rate or a higher skip rate, which ultimately results in a slower placement of solar panels. Thus, smaller is better. This dichotomy is what I call the steel paradox. In some earlier testing, I had tried running all 4 SpiderTrains at the same time, which translates into 4 times the blueprint size and 4 times the ghost entity list. My hope was to increase the automation level and increase the solar panel placement rate.
Impossible.
But as we now know, the placement rate actually decreased. Because the ghost entity list was so large, there was only a fleeting chance that the SpiderTrain lined up with the loop iteration, and the net result is large swaths of missed buildings. But it also gets so bad that the SpiderTrains come to a complete halt, because in some areas they have to build the landfill in front of them in order to continue on, but they can't build the landfill in front of them because the loop iteration isn't lined up. In order to improve, I need to increase the blueprint size, and I need to decrease the blueprint size. So instead of actually working on some improvements, I just continue to deconstruct the decommissioned parts of the factory. I'll leave the steel paradox for future me to figure out. I'm going to need 72 times 4 plus 9 plus 5 Knuclear Sandwiches every 36 minutes. Let's just call it an even 10. Is that a lot of resources? 10 per minute. It's only like 2 blue belts of steel, 2 blue belts of red circuits, 2 blue belts of concrete, and negligible amount of copper. It's actually pretty cheap. Well, let's go ahead and build that.
Your primitive add-on is complete.
This will produce about 10.5 sandwiches per minute. We're also going to need about 3 blue belts of landfill. So I set up an unpatched stone farm in order to get the freshest local produce I can. Wait, freshness isn't in this version though.
What is my purpose?
You are the brood mother.
Oh my god. What is my purpose?
You are the brood mother's cousin.
Oh my god. What is my purpose?
You carry the brood mother's cousin's accessories.
Oh my god.
In order to have a successful merging ritual, we first must lay down all the trains. This creates the base skeleton of the monster. There are 16 individual bones that range from length 1 all the way up to length 144, which are then individually composed of either locomotives, cargo wagons, or artillery wagons, for a grand total of 250 cars, upon which the fleshy bits will be attached to. And now the ritual can begin. 1,944 spider legs were grafted onto the bone structure. This gives the monster a functioning body. However, there's something missing, as creating the body is the easy part. The hard part is creating the monster's brain. I have no organic brain that I can just glue onto the side of a train, so instead I'm gonna have to create a mechanical substitute. To start, here's the memory bank, which is connected to the logic unit. However, with such a large and complicated beast, one logic thread is not gonna cut it here. We're gonna need 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 threaded processing unit in order to control the monster. Okay, there are only like 5 false starts, but I think this is the one. I place down the final connecting piece on the track, and then I have to sit in my Spider-Man themed child car seat of the lead SpiderTrain. This is of critical importance, which we'll talk about in the future. And now I can finally get back to placing down the remaining 8 million solar panels. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, does whatever a SpiderTrain does. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, does whatever a SpiderTrain does. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, do 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 do. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, what can't you do for me? Do 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 do. Enhance. 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 Please enhance.
Wait, something interrupted our SCV.
The biters were able to amass a large enough attack wave to take out a car wagon, a locomotive, and the caboose Spidertron. And when any car on a train is destroyed, the train automatically goes into manual mode, or in other words, it just stands still where it is. So this is easily fixed. The cost of one spider and a couple of car trains is trivial. However, the broken down train is here. I'm in my Spider-Man car seat over here, and the supplies I need are at the main base. After being picked up by the construction cluster, I now need to go all the way over here to the memory bank.
This week.
What is it?
The count's off.
Excuse me?
There's a soul missing. The count's off.
After fixing the count, I can finally go to the broken down train, repair it up, this time with a couple additional security Spidertrons.
Our Thor has been repaired.
And now I need to go back to my Spider-Man car seat. And finally, we can start this up again. Okay, now is as good as any other time to actually explain what is happening here. For the dozens of, or I should say the potential dozens of us who find this interesting, please subscribe. This video is taking absurdly long to make. A SpiderTrain Mark 1 is a spider following a spider following a spider following a spider. However, in the SpiderTrain Mark 2, a SpiderTrain is a spider following a train, and then another spider following the train, and then another spider following the train, and then another spider following the train. Thus, a SpiderTrain. Do you get it? It's a spider train, it's a spider, and a train to make a SpiderTrain. Do you get it now? Anyways, one of the reasons for choosing the Mark 1 variant was the simple control schema. You could control many spiders with just one remote. In the Mark 2 variant, all of the spiders are following a train, thus, all of the spider movements are determined by the train movements. And we can control the movement of the trains through scheduling, train stations, and signaling. Or in other words, we can control the movement of the train by using circuits. This is why we're using trains, to be able to connect the Spidertron remote up to the circuit network. There is no direct way to connect up the remote up to the circuit network, but by using the train intermediary, we can connect the SpiderTrain remote up to the circuit network. That's the upside. The downside is that trains can only move on tracks. So, if you were to imagine the world as a pizza pie,
Mamma and Papa Briccolini will not cook you no linguine. Don't you know we specialize in one thing, that's the pizza pie.
Since we can only move on tracks, the very first thing we have to do is lay down tracks. Before we debug the pizza, we have to lay down tracks. Before we deforest the pizza, we have to lay down tracks. Before we pour dirt in the puddles, we have to lay down tracks. The train only goes where the tracks go, and the spiders only go where the trains go. This adds an additional limitation to the system, as we can only build new track within the spider's construction area range. To extend the track from a currently tracked position, there are two options. First is the Wallace and Gromit style, where you continuously place down the track right in front of you just in time, every time. As you might have guessed, there's a lot of problems with this method. One problem is that trains don't continuously run to their death. You can't set the train to just go forward. You have to set the train to go to a station, which means in order for the train to move forward, there has to be a station in front of it. And in this configuration, there's one station per standard block, which means one station every 36 tiles. Why not use more stations? Well, this is a bit of a UPS issue. In this overly simplified example, I have 12,000 stations of the same name, all placed in a single line of track that just loops up and down. And then I have a single train set to just continuously go the entire length of the track in every single station. And while at rest, we can see that the train cost is 0 and the train pathfinder cost is 0. However, if we set it off, we can see that the train cost shoots all the way up and peaks at about 1.6 milliseconds, while the train pathfinder stays at 0. Why does this happen? I have no idea. This time, we'll have 45,000 continuous stations, and sending one train through the system results in a train cost of about 7.2 milliseconds, while the train pathfinder remains at 0. How does this make sense? What is it doing? I don't really understand. What I do understand is that there's basically a soft cap at about 10k stations, and anything beyond that, the costs just get out of hand incredibly fast. So once you work through all the math, at most I can have one train station per standard block. But then there's the inverse question of, why not have train stations less often? Why not every other standard block? To answer this, we have to look at the grid configuration of the SpiderTrain Mark II. And here, we're going to need as much power as we can get. This has been true for every configuration thus far, because bots are very, very power hungry. But a new addition here is that we need to add one set of legs in order to keep pace with the base rate of the SpiderTrain. Because remember, we're trying to lay all these solar panels down faster, so we actually want the SpiderTrain itself to move faster. That means there's only room for 5 roboports, which means max construction area that we can have is 89 by 89. This is the width and height of a square where the SpiderTron is in the center, which most importantly means we only get 44.5 tiles in the forward direction to build the track in. But wait, you might say, you said the standard block was 36 tiles. Couldn't you extend the block out another 8 tiles? And the answer is no, absolutely not. This is due to the wingspan of the SpiderTrain. If the blueprint to the next station only extends 36 tiles, yet our construction area extends another 8 tiles, our wingspan is that 8 tiles, which is incredibly important. Why is that extra spacing so incredibly important? Because of randomness. The randomness I'm talking about here is the follow command. When you select a SpiderTron to follow another entity, it will randomly select a point on that entity to follow. For example, the train takes up multiple tiles of space. The follow command could select any of those tiles that are inside the train to follow, but also it can choose points outside of the train to follow. I cannot describe to you how incredibly annoying this is. It can follow a point inside the train, or it could follow a point outside of the train. To further complicate things, the follow command also has a leash on it, meaning if the spider and the train are currently moving and then the train comes to a halt, it will stop at the leash range. It won't follow the point, it'll follow the point plus a leash range, which all this combined, there is no way to get spiders to the very front of the train.
Looks like we're going to the late game.
Thus, the Wallace and Gromit style of train track placement does not work. I should clarify here that it's not that the method doesn't work. You can clearly see it working in the background. The problem is that it does not work fast enough. Every time you see this no path error show up, that means the 1 second timer is up and the train is ready to advance to the next station, but it can't because either the track to the station or the station has not been placed yet. So instead it just stalls out and then becomes slower. So if we just need to speed it up, why don't we just add a bunch more spiders laying down track? And it may be a bit faster, although it's hard to tell. This doesn't actually solve our speed problem, because each spider can deploy 125 robots at once. Being able to deploy more robots is not the problem. The issue here is our old friend, the Ghost-to-Bot pipeline. It just takes too long for this linkage to happen. Another option is to research more robot speed, because it takes time for the bot to fly from the spider to the ghost entity to place it down. So let's just cheat in 100 levels of worker robot speed, which would cost 18e to the... Does that break Factorio? I think it's just so unreasonably large they don't even bother trying to calculate it. Because it should be about 18e to the 31st hour. If I took my 4-core SPU, it would take about 8 times 10 to the 21st years of time to get to this research level. The process is, in fact, noticeably faster. However, even with the travel time reduced to essentially 0 here, the ghost-to-bot pipeline is still just too slow to keep up. So, if we want to extend the track from a currently tracked position, the Wallace and Gromit style of placing it down just in front of you does work. However, it's not fast enough. This leaves only one other alternative. The other Wallace and Gromit style of laying down tracks parallel to your tracked position. In this configuration, the track you are moving along has already been pre-built, which means we get to forego any of the issues of placement speed. We also get to forego the issue of bringing these spiders to the very front of the train, because as these tracks are in parallel, the entire train gets dragged alongside the parallel track at a consistent distance. The distance to the blueprint is no longer a function of how far forward the spider is, as the distance is now a static 36 tiles. Essentially, this configuration nullifies all of my previous issues, except for this one. The random outside of target selection area issue gets amplified. So that sounds great and all, but where are we going to find a long, straight path to build the next long, straight, parallel path from? And the answer is from the previous long, straight, parallel path that we built. In order to transition from parallel path to parallel path, all we have to do is a 180 to go down the path we just built. And then at the other end, we do a 180 to go up the path, and then a 180 to go down the path, etc., such that we get one long continuous path that the SpiderTrain can continuously extend in a parallel direction from. The current length is getting close to 1 million tiles long. So these lines of roboports at the top and the bottom are the top cap and the bottom cap. These end caps obviously do a lot more than just U-turn the train, which we'll talk about in the future. But one really important thing that they do is only allow one train per straightaway. Since we have 17 trains that each do something different, we end up with 17 parallel tracks that have a gradient of completionness. On one end we have wilderness, in the middle we have none toppings left beef, and at the other end we have a completed solar panel field.
Hey, something's blocked the landing zone.
The job of the first SpiderTrain is to place the next parallel path of train tracks and train stops. Since they're building in complete wilderness, these spiders carry a little bit of everything. You have to carry landfill and cliff explosives, as well as have enough room to pick up trees and rocks that are in the way. While primarily building in parallel, they also still have the capability to build directly in front of them, which they do have to do occasionally. For example, when building over water, because this is 1.1, you can either place landfill or you can place buildings on top of landfill, but you can't do both at the same time. In order to overcome this, there has to be 2 passes over the same area, and the first pass comes from the parallel to place the landfill, and then when it loops around and is on that parallel path now, it can now build in front of it to place those tracks down. Another time when it will have to place tracks down directly in front of it is when marauding biters end up destroying the tracks. Look at all those biters over there, just standing there, menacingly. Thus, it'll have to rely on placing tracks right in front of it again, otherwise it just gets completely stuck and just stands still. But it's really important that this lead train stays on time, because there's 17 trains behind it. If that lead train gets delayed, all 17 of those other trains also get delayed. So it's really important that that first train stays on schedule. This is where the second train comes in. The second train only has one job, and its job is to keep the first train on schedule. It does this by repairing as much track as possible in front of the lead train, such that the lead train doesn't have to rely on the always slower front placement. Recall that the track is one continuous track that loops up and down. This means that consecutive spider trains start on opposite sides, and if they were both traveling at the same speed, they'd meet at the halfway point. But here, we want the second spider train to repair as much of the track in front of the first spider train as possible, which means this is the rare train that is actually on a faster schedule, as it's essentially racing down the track as fast as possible before the first spider train gets to it. I'm now introducing a new segment called Cut Content Reconstituted as PowerPoint, or C.R.A.P for short. Feel free to pause and digest the slides, or not. Thank you for attending my crap talk. Now we go back to the regular scheduled narration. SpiderTrain number 3 has two distinct jobs. And the first one, as you can already tell by the artillery firing, is to clear out spider nests and spider worms. But this leads to two really important questions.
Hello there.
The first, how are we going to deal with all of the bugs that this spawns? And then the second question, how does the artillery know what to fire upon? You can see it firing directly into black chunks, or chunks that are unexplored. And the answer to both of these questions is directly related to the Spider-Man themed child car seat that I'm sitting in the lead SpiderTrain. But remember, it's a child car seat, and you don't put child car seats in the front seat, you have to sit in the back seat. So I'm in the back of the train here. We finally got there. There's a reason why this is here. Let's start with the biters. How are we going to deal with them? As always, the solution to all problems is either more spiders, more trains, or more spider trains. And the solution to this is no different. When a biter's nest gets attacked by the artillery, the biters pull out a counter battery radar to calculate the origin of the shell, and then they run straight at it since they brought mandibles to an artillery fight. So the solution is more spiders at the artillery turret to attack the wave that comes crashing into the train wagons. But there's a slight complication here. The SpiderTrain is moving, which means the biters will attack where that artillery wagon was. They won't track the actual moving artillery wagon. So, by the time that wave makes it to the artillery train, I need there to be a train section there equipped with the attack spiders that can catch the wave. This setup works best when zero artillery range has been researched. The further away the biters are from the train, the longer it'll take for those biters to walk to the train. Which means we need a longer train to ensure that there is a section of SpiderTrain there to catch the attack wave. And these attack waves can be quite large, which means I need a pretty tight spacing of spiders along the whole length of the train. But when all these spiders are in a line, and the spiders come in perpendicular to that line, you get a real nice crossfire that can handle these really large attack waves. But you can also get these really large attack waves on the precipice of the corner. But in those situations, we don't have the perfect formation of a straight line of spiders because it's curved there. And this is the second purpose of these end caps, which is protection on the turns. So this is great and all, but what does it have to do with me sitting in my Spider-Man themed car seat in the back seat of the lead SpiderTrain? Why? What is this? This lead SpiderTrain is going to be consistently in the danger zone, where large waves of enemies are passing through to target the artillery train. But there's the edge case, where the lead SpiderTrain intercepts the attack wave. So, I have to prepare for this edge case. And the solution, as always, is more spiders. What I like to call the explosive reactive spiders. It's where you take your base vehicle and just surround it with explosives in every direction so that you can't even see what's underneath it anymore. It's so many spiders that it's actually difficult to get into my car seat. This cluster of explosive reactive spiders is able to handle the large attack waves pretty well, and everything's great, except that there's an edge case. Recall me complaining about how no spider can cross this line due to the way the follow command works. When the train moves forward, the spiders have a leash range and a delay until they start moving forwards themselves, which means there's this brief window where the train has no protection on it, which begs the question, what if an attack wave happens to hit at that exact moment?
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
And what will happen is the train gets attacked and exploded because there's no protection. And this is where the Spider-Man themed car seat comes in. It's the solution to the edge case because biters are like vampires.
I'm designed to kill.
I don't care.
I've killed people before.
It does not matter.
I've never wanted a human's blood so much in my life.
While the biters are targeting where the artillery shell was shot from, along the way they can reevaluate what they want to attack. And for things like train tracks and train stops, these are ignored as peaceful things. However, humans are evaluated as the #1 enemy. So the biters will reevaluate their attack and go straight for the human. The very final piece of the puzzle is that I sit in the back seat, the car that is the furthest behind. It leaves the cover of the explosive reactive spiders the least. It is usually at least partially covered for the full duration, whereas the front seat, for a brief window, is completely exposed. So the scent of a human causes the biters to reevaluate their attack target to a target that is always at least partially covered by the explosive reactive spiders. And that's why I sit in the back seat of the lead SpiderTrain in my Spider-Man themed child car seat. reason number 1. Reason number 2 is using my presence as a mobile radar. Because we have to clear the biters before we can build the tracks, we need to fire the artillery shells into chunks that have yet to be explored. To do this, I'm using a technique discovered by Michael Hendricks. He defined the difference between ungenerated and unexplored areas, even though they're both represented on the map the same way, simply as a black chunk. Ungenerated are chunks of the map that have no representation in the game yet. Is there water? Is there land? Is there biters? Who knows? It doesn't matter, as the game isn't keeping track of this chunk. Unexplored areas are areas of the map that have been generated, but the player has yet to explore that area. So a spider will generate new chunks when it gets sent down the next parallel path. However, we still need to shoot biters beyond that next parallel path, and a spider will not generate chunks far enough out, as the artillery will not search for biter targets in ungenerated areas because those areas don't exist. They're null. What we need to do is force the generation of more chunks beyond the lead SpiderTrain's max generation range. And this is what Michael Hendricks discovered. The player character will always generate and explore a certain number of chunks around them, but they will also generate but leave unexplored a larger range of chunks around that. Thus, if a player starts running in a direction, the game doesn't have to quickly on the fly generate those chunks. It can have those chunks pre-generated. So, if I sit in the lead SpiderTrain, it'll always generate about 10 chunks in front of me, such that the artillery can see the biters in those generated but unexplored chunks and fire upon those. All this combined makes this Spider-Man themed child car seat in the back seat of the lead SpiderTrain the critical linchpin of the entire operation.
The landing zone is occupied. I say, crush them.
Okay, I'm almost done explaining what SpiderTrain number 3 of 17 does. In addition to clearing out the biters' nests and absorbing the attack waves, the third SpiderTrain also lays down half of the landfill. Because the SpiderTrain itself is moving faster than previous versions, having one spider deal with the entire lane just isn't feasible anymore. So I have to divide it up into 2 segments. SpiderTrain number 3 takes care of the left segment, and then SpiderTrain number 4 takes care of the right segment. By doing this left-right split down the rail, I can have 2 consecutive trains work at the same time without any overlapping work areas. Which is great, except for our old friend, the follow command, which randomly selects points outside of the train width. If the spider is sent too far to the side, it can bleed over to adjacent construction areas, which means I have to go to every individual spider and make sure that it's following the train inside of the train. And that's why it's so incredibly annoying and frustrating that it can just randomly pick a point outside of the train to follow. Just follow the train I told you to follow. SpiderTrain number 5 is just a spacer. It doesn't actually do anything besides add a gap between the next trains so that their work areas do not bleed over between each other. Number 6 does deforestation and rock removal on the left side of the track. Number 7 does it on the right side of the track. Number 8 is a spacer. Number 9 adds the power poles and cliff explosives. Number 10 is another spacer. Number 11 places the left accumulators. Number 12 does the right accumulators. 13 is a spacer. 14 is the left solar panels. And finally 15 places the right solar panels. And with that, we finally reach our goal of having a completed solar panel field.
Oh, a successful metamorphosis.
The first 3 SpiderTrains are highly specialized and meticulously planned and tested and iterated upon until I got it working. However, all of the other trains are just doing left side, right side, spacer, left side, right side, spacer, left side, right side, spacer to get through all the stages. And they are just that simple. One notable thing about each of these SpiderTrains is that they all get a caboose spider, which contains a small sample of all of the materials required in previous tasks to give any skipped entity an additional chance per SpiderTrain that passes by. Which leads into SpiderTrain number 16, which is a spacer. But then SpiderTrain number 17, the caboose SpiderTrain, is actually pretty highly specialized again. And its main job is to remove all the train stations. As we had previously discovered, there's a soft cap at around 10k continuous train stops, and anything beyond that causes some pretty significant UPS drops. And it's not that the train stop entity itself is costing a lot of UPS, it's the cost of trains moving through the large networks that incur huge penalties when there are huge numbers of train stops. If I didn't remove any, in the end I'd end up with around 92,000 continuous stations, which is just untenable. So I need the final train to clean up all of the train stops that the train is currently using. Wait.
That command's no good, boss.
How does that work? When the station gets marked for deconstruction, trains will still path to it, and they'll still stop at it, essentially acting as if it's still there. But the spiders can still inverse Wallace and Gromit it, and pick up the station before the train goes to it. And once the entity is removed, that's the point when the trains no longer path to it and no longer stop at it. If too many stations in a row get reversed Wallace and Gromited, then the train will just continue to accelerate and accelerate and accelerate and accelerate, because it's not actually stopping at any station. To prevent this runaway train situation, I have to add ballast to it. And that's why this train only has 2 locomotives, but it has 25 wagons as ballast to prevent the runaway train situation. That should pretty much cover anything you ever wanted to know about the individual SpiderTrains. But when you zoom out to the entire package of the SpiderTrain printer, that's only really about a third of all the configurations, because I've only briefly mentioned the top cap and the bot cap, but the top cap alone is on version number, I think it's 33.5 at this point, which means there's probably about 50 versions I went through to get to this working. And then on top of that, I have not discussed at all how the memory and 11 logic threads actually function. I've only mentioned that they exist so far. I hope there's at least somebody else who finds this stuff interesting. Let's go ahead and start with the top cap, which is the interface that holds everything together. As we already discussed, its first job is to U-turn the trains, and its second job is to defend the trains on the U-turn, and its third job is to be the pit stop. In the Mark I variant, we brought the trains to the pit stop. However, in the Mark II variant, we bring the pit stop to the SpiderTrains, because any second that the train is not working on the solar field is a wasted second. Basically, every walled box is its individual pit stop, as there's gaps between the roboport coverage to prevent any long flight times of logistic bots. Therefore, all of the 29 items needed are belted in on 19 blue belts, or I should say 18 in, 1 out, because if you were to amortize out the expansion speed, vertically, the solar panel field would be expanding at a rate of 532 tiles per minute. However, horizontally, it's only moving at 2 tiles per minute, which makes the simplest solution of just belt it in also a viable solution. In order to be able to replicate itself, the pit stop needs a bunch of low volume items, like the constant combinator, decider combinator, arithmetic combinator, gates, walls, belts, underground belts, splitters, train signals, roboports, nuclear sandwiches, nuclear sandwich accessories, requester chests, storage chests, and laser turrets. All of these low volume items just get put into boxes. Then we also need some items in the mid bulk range. Like every pit stop uses 3,500 logistic robots. We also need some construction bots. Both of these just get pulled directly off the belt into the roboports. We then have a line of nuclear fuel and artillery shells, which just get belted around the U-turn with a splattering of inserters so they can just be directly inserted into the trains when they come by. But after that, we get into the true bulk items that we need to build the actual solar field itself, like rockets to kill all the bugs, repair packs, substations, cliff explosives, train stops, and rails. But for solar panels and accumulators, we actually need more than 1/2 of a blue belt to keep up. But then we get to the bulk section, where we need 3 belts of landfill to keep up with demand. And then there's 1 belt going in the opposite direction, as in output, where all of the wood and stone and coal that gets picked up can be discarded. So, at the rightmost top cap, we have the right cap, which handles the input and outputs of all 20 of these lanes. The bulk items, aka just landfill, is being produced locally. However, the rest of the items are either being trained in or out, all the way back to the main base or the radioactive megadump. This way the train supply lines stay static, but the belt supply lines continue to grow. Yes, the end supply chain will be extremely long, but at a rate of 2 tiles per minute, it won't matter at all.
You're at max supply! Attack move to win!
The bottom cap is a mirror of the top cap, as its first job is to U-turn the train, and its second job is to protect the train on the U-turn. But it is not a pit stop. There aren't any belts of materials being injected on the bottom side, yet it still has to be able to build itself. This is where the first SpiderTrain comes in, as underneath all these explosive reactive spiders, there are 2 wagons, and they pick up materials on the top cap and then drop off the materials at the bottom cap. This way it can vastly simplify the supply chain, as I don't have to duplicate the entire thing for the bottom as well. Now we get to one of the most critical tasks of both the top and bot cap, which is limiting the number of trains per straightaway to 1, as in not allow the next train to go down the straightaway until the previous train has finished its task on that straightaway. This is how we get our task separation. So we could just put 1 signal at every cap, and that would do it. Except that I want to know when the train enters the cap and when it exits the cap. With this single signal setup, we only have the capability to monitor when a train exits the cap by looking for the pattern of a green light then red light, meaning that the track ahead cleared and then the train waiting in the cap went forward, thus exiting the cap. But we can't monitor when the train enters the cap because there is no separation between the cap and the straightaway. We could estimate when we expect the train to enter the cap. This would be done by monitoring the exit signal of the previous cap and then putting a timer on that of when we would expect the train to arrive. However, this is what I like to call a passive signal because it's not monitoring the actual state of the system, it's estimating the state of the system. Whereas the exit signal is what I like to call an active signal because it is monitoring the state of the system and then telling you what the state of the system is. I think this is one of the issues that Dosh ran into when he went to the edge of the world, in that the only signals available to him were a bunch of passive signals.
There is no amount of testing that could prepare me for the freak combinations of biters and terrain. The 50-second timer I set works almost all the time, but even if it's a 1 in 1,000 chance, that still means it's gonna happen 10 times before I'm finished. And sometimes the biters will get stuck in trees and get massively delayed so that they attack right when the new section is being built.
So it's just a passive signal estimating the state of the system. So what I really wanted when designing the solar printer was to use as many active signals as possible and to reduce any reliance on passive signals for controlling the system. This requires a double signal where the spacing between the signals is shorter than the shortest train length. And then all we have to do is monitor the second signal. For the starting state, we'll assume that the straightaway ahead is occupied, but the cap is clear, so that when the train comes in, the second signal goes red, indicating a train has entered. But because the signal spacing is shorter than the shortest train length, a little bit of the train overhangs that signal and still occupies the previous block. Thus, the signal in the previous cap sees that the block is occupied and won't allow that spider train to advance. This is how we maintain our task separation. And then in the next state, when the path ahead is clear, the train advances and the second signal goes green, actively indicating that the train has now exited the cap. And that is how we get our clear active exit and active enter signals. Now, we can count the number of enters and exits at every cap to get a precise measurement of what the current state of the system is. The next job of the top and bot cap is classified, but the next job is to now transmit and receive the cap's current state back to the main memory and CPU. And that's what this big block of combinators is doing. In order to simplify things, every cap, top, and bot have the exact same block of combinators. Our entry point into this system is to monitor the red state of the second signal. The first thing we do is isolate it, then we run an edge detector, and then it goes through a falling edge detector and a rising edge detector. So our input signal is a steady 1 red for there is a train there, or a steady 0 red, meaning there is no train there. We transform this into a pulse when the signal goes from 0 to 1, indicating that a train is entering. And we also get a positive pulse for a falling edge, aka the train is exiting. After that, we want some memory, because we want to count the number of pulses that we've seen so far. Typically, we'd store this as a addition feedback loop, just adding 1 every time we see a pulse. However, the special sauce here is that we store this as a logical left shift, and that's the memory that stores the state of the system. To explain this, I need to zoom out a little bit, in that there are 2 networks, the green network and the red network. The green network is used for local communications only, that is, within the specific cap. But the red network is a global network that all of the top caps and the bottom caps and the main memory is connected to. In other words, it's a bus that all of these devices can receive or transmit on. But the problem is that because it is a bus, we have to ensure that messages from different devices don't overwrite or corrupt each other. To safely communicate on the bus, I could come up with some full protocol where you ask to transmit on the bus, and then the controller responds with a, "Are you sure you wanted to join the bus?" And you're like, "Yes, I'm sure I want to join the bus." And then it acknowledges your acknowledgement, and then you acknowledge its acknowledgement, and then you do that a few more times, and then eventually you get permission to send the data. However, just doing that with combinators does not sound simple or fun. Instead, I chose a brain-dead simple option, logical left shift. Suppose you wanted to transmit the count of 4 and the count of 5 at the same time. The way Factorio handles this is that all incoming signals are added together. So the 4 and the 5 would corrupt each other, and the count being sent to the main memory would be 9. The solution is, before we send the data out to the bus, we can encode the data in a way that it won't interfere with any other message on the bus. We can do this by encoding each bit to represent one state, where a 0 represents no change, and a 1 represents a cap entering that state. So, in our previous example, 4 would be encoded to a 16, which is 1 shifted left 4 times, and 5 would be encoded to 32, which is 1 shifted left 5 times, and then the bus would add them up to be 48, but because of our encoding method, the two bits don't interfere with each other. The message is encoded, but it's not corrupted. We can still recover the original message. So the main memory receives a 48, which then has to go through a decoder. To check for a change in each state, the decoder masks off that specific bit that represents that state. And if the result is all zeros, that means there is no change to that state. But if the result has a 1 in it, that means there is a change to that state. So, even if they do overlap, we can still reconstruct the original messages of 4 and 5. If two caps are transitioning to the same state at the same time, that means something else went horribly wrong.
This week.
What is it?
The count's off.
Excuse me?
There's a soul missing. The count's off.
The observant of you might have noticed that the count of 4 was mapped to the 5th bit, and the count of 5 was mapped to the 6th bit, and that's because that first bit is hardware reserved, as a bit shift left fills in that rightmost slot with a 0. So, if you were to shift all zeros, you would get all zeros, which means in order to start this up, you need to prime that first bit with a 1 so that you can actually shift that 1 across the bits. Back in combinator land, to make this happen, we only need 2 combinators. One, a bit shift left memory unit, and then a primer that'll add that first 1 into the state. Those two are the entire encoding circuit. And then we do an edge detector on the memory state because we only want to report changes back to the main memory. As a precaution, we have to cleanse the data before sending it out on the network. Like masking off the primer bit, we don't care about that. And then also not enabling any signals to pass until the activation signal is active. When building the combinator system, we cannot guarantee the order of which the combinators will be built. Thus, if built out of order, we could send a corrupted signal out onto the network. Now we can finally broadcast this signal onto the network. Notably, we do this over the blue channel, or I'll just call it channel 1. Over at the main memory, or the receiver, we have the top cap coming in, going through an isolator, and then we have the bot cap coming in and going through an isolator. Isolators, isolators, isolators. You can never have too many isolators. These signals then go through the decoder, which for each individual state has a mask, and then a translator, and then the memory unit, a counter. For example, state 1 indicates the first SpiderTrain has entered the cap, so it's a red signal. The decoder mask uses the second bit because it is the first state. The translator then looks to see if the value is greater than 0. If so, translate it into 1 state A, so that the memory unit can then count the number of state A's. So then the second state is when the first train leaves the cap, which is indicated by a green. This uses bit number 3, and then translate it into state B for the logic. And since there are 17 SpiderTrains, we have to do this for a total of 34 times, or 2 per train, an enter and an exit. The first problem is that we run out of letters, because there's only 26 numbers in the alphabet. I end up using fluids to count higher. The second problem is that Factorio uses integers for every circuit value, and an integer only has 32 bits, which if you subtract 1 for the hardware reserve, means that per channel, I can only represent 31 unique states, which means I have to add a second yellow channel in order to add more states. Over at the caps, this means I have to have a channel detector to detect when I need to switch the channels. Then I have to have a channel fuse, which is a memory unit that will permanently switch the states. So then we have our channel 1 disabler and our channel 2 enabler. Finally, before sending channel 2 out to the global network, I have to send it through an activation switch as well. Channel 2 will be encoded the exact same way as channel 1, using the exact same hardware. Furthermore, we don't even have to reset the memory unit, because when the 1 makes it all the way to the most significant bit, and then it does one more left shift over, the entire value becomes 0 again, which means the primer will kick in and add a 1 back to the least significant bit. And that's why I like this encoding schema so much. The encoder literally only takes 2 combinators. That covers the entire process of transmitting data from the caps to the main memory. In addition to that, we need to transmit from the main memory back to the caps. We need to receive data as well, which begs the question, if we're sending out state data, what data are we receiving in return? And the answer is PTC, or positive train control. Here's the scenario. To maintain task separation, we have the caboose overhang, causing the straightaway block to be occupied, and not allowing that next train to pass until the current train has cleared that block. The problem is that there is marauding biters everywhere that just stand there, all menacing like, and they end up destroying a lot of tracks, like tens of thousands of tracks. The problem is that a physical break in the track is the same as if you virtually broke up the tracks with a train signal. It becomes 2 separate blocks. So that signal looks ahead and now sees that there is no train in that shortened block and says, "Go ahead train, it's clear. There's nobody in your block anymore." So the train goes forward until it reaches that broken track, where these spiders have the equipment to repair the track. But once that track is repaired, there is no train signal separating the trains. They're on the same block, which means they just crash into each other. This is where positive train control comes in. We only want to send trains down the next track if the previous train has been positively identified as reaching its end of its track. This is that passive versus active signals again. Instead of just estimating that the train ahead has made it to the other side, we can directly measure when that train has made it to the other side.
He's got friends on the other side.
Which means the data we're transmitting from the main memory to the caps is blocking data. The main memory can pause the progress of any individual SpiderTrain until certain conditions have been met. The other scenario I'm concerned about is the distance between SpiderTrain 1 and SpiderTrain 3, because SpiderTrain 3 has the artillery in it. If the third SpiderTrain falls too far behind the first one, it will literally be building into biters' nests. Inversely, if the first SpiderTrain gets too far ahead, it will also be building into biters' nests. These two trains require additional synchronization so that neither of them get too far apart from each other. Back in Combinator land, we're going to use the same encoding schema as we used before, but this time using the pink channel to transmit from the main memory to the caps. This is the PTC section of the main memory. For example, if we're looking at state 3 or state C, we look at the counts of B states to C states. If they don't match, we block the train. Look at the count of C states to D states, and if they do match, we block the train. And the state we're trying to block is the next fourth state, so we send the encoded value of 16 over the network. And we only have to do this for the first 5 trains, as the biters are essentially playing a game of Frogger, where they have to cross 5 lanes of crisscrossing traffic. And you know what? If they make it that far, they deserve to live. None of them have ever made it that far before. Back over at the top cap, we now have to receive this message, which means we have to decode it. The good news is that we don't have to decode every single state like we did in the main memory. We only have to decode one state, which is the state we're currently in. Which means we get to reuse our bit shift left memory unit again as our mask for the decoder. First, the pink channel comes in and goes through an isolator. And then this is the decoder. This is the decoder channel selector. We don't actually care about any signals coming in from the second yellow channel. We only care about the first blue channel. And then this gets sent to the first signal, where if there's any value greater than 0, that means close the signal. Block any trains from moving forward. And now finally, that's the entirety of the top cap, bot cap, and memory systems. This only leaves 11 logic threads to talk about.
Wow, you're capped out! Time to make some room!
The beating heart of all of these logic threads is the blueprint deployer, which comes from the recursive blueprints mod. And it's a chest that has 1 slot for a blueprint, and if you connect it up to the circuit network and provide a construction robot signal of 1, it will paste that blueprint into the world, thus fully automating blueprints. This is why I wanted to connect the SpiderTrain remote up to the circuit network, which is also the reason why I wanted to use spiders plus trains to make SpiderTrains. We can also supply the deployer with an X and Y coordinate, which adjusts where in the world it's going to be placed. It also works on planners, as long as we supply the width and the height of the plan that we want to place into the world. Because this is 1.1, the only way to view the values of the circuit network is to just put them on a power pole for some reason. So we have 1 power pole next to every blueprint deployer so that we can preview all the values being sent to it. To organize multiple blueprint deployers, I place them into a state machine, and I do this physically with a box and inserter chain, which pass a single construction robot through. The box that contains the construction robot visually shows me what state the state machine is in, and then the inserters, briefly holding onto the robot, is used as the trigger for the state. And then when it makes it to the end of the chain, it takes a belt all the way to the top because it's looping. So So here's the general structure. We have the blueprint deployer in the middle with the what, the blueprint inside of it, and everything to the right of it deals with the where, the coordinates that need to be supplied, and everything to the left of it deals with the when, the state machine and the conditions to the state machine. Each blueprint deployer represents a state that the state machine could be in, and we can basically draw a straight line going across where things to the left of it is providing the conditions for that state, and things to the right of it are providing the coordinates for that state. And for this first logic thread, it's one long single chain. However, in the second logic thread, it's only one state, but we have two loops over it, meaning we end up with all of this positional data for just one deployer, and all of this conditional data for the same deployer. The where data, the x and y coordinate, is coming from 4 different sources. So we first have a global offset, which will apply to every single deployer. This made it much easier to transfer from my testing world to the real world. Well, not the real world, but you know what I mean. And then there's a loop offset, which changes the value based on the current loop of the state machine. This is on a per thread basis. And then there's the local offset, which is a unique static value for every blueprint deployer, which was manually tuned. And then occasionally there's the shift offset, which doesn't really matter. But in total, there's 3 to 4 sources of offset values that are used to calculate the exact x and y coordinate. Back over to the left side of the blueprint deployer, we have the when data, and this comes from the state machine itself, the loop count of the state machine, and all of these state values from the main memory. For example, this first conditional compares the number of state A's from the main memory to the loop count. The white signal is a function of the loop count. I don't remember exactly what it is. As another example, over here we have a resettable timer, where the reset is determined by a main memory and loop count comparison. However, the triggers are actually based off of the state of the timer. Basically, it's all very specific, and there's a bunch of different ways to set up the trigger conditions themselves. So far we've covered where and when, and lastly, but definitely not least, we'll cover the what. What is logic thread number 1 doing? It is building the top cap, the bot cap, and the straightaway rails. Because remember, before we can do anything else, the very first thing we have to do is build rails, because that's how we get the SpiderTrains to move. So there are 8 states here. The first and last state are the same, so we're going to skip over the first one for now. The second state places down the entire straightaway for the next parallel path and the current path, as well as the bare minimum amount of landfill required to cover it. The goal here is not to flatten the land or fill in the land or clear the land. The goal is to just place the bare minimum tracks down so we can have 16 future trains do all of the other jobs. And we do it for the next and current path because of the 1.1 limitation of only being able to place landfill or things on top of landfill, but not both at the same time. And while that first SpiderTrain is busy going down that parallel path, what we need to get busy doing is expanding the top cap over 1. And the first step in building a top cap is to clear the land. So we just send a blanket deconstruct. This is also a super fun 1.1 feature. If you have items laying on the ground, and then say you place an assembler over it or a wall over it, the items on the ground will be automatically marked for deconstruction. However, if you put a belt onto it, these things will not be automatically marked for deconstruction. They will go onto the belt. Okay, but why would there be items lying on the ground? And this is the 1.1 special, where hitting rocks with artillery puts stone on the ground, which is incredibly annoying. So annoying that it's completely removed in 2.0. Next, we place the skeleton of the top cap. This solves 2 problems. One problem is the same 1.1 problem of landfill or items, but not both. You'll get real tired of me saying that. The second problem it solves is the Roboport's construction range. Because we want a gap between the logistics networks of the Roboport, the construction range does extend further, but not far enough to cover the entire next cap. So we need to build at least the first column of Roboports to extend the range. And in order to do this, we need to supply the bare minimum, which is cliff explosive, substations, landfill, a trash port, and Roboports. In the best case scenario, the full skeleton is built. However, in the worst case scenario, i.e. building 100% into water, the minimum landfill and Roboport coverage will be built so that we can continue to the next state. And the next state is to build the entire thing. Next, we build the next parallel path, which is the exact same as the first double parallel path, except that the train stations are on opposite sides because we're going up instead of down, or down instead of up. And now while the train's on this straightaway, we have to build the bot cap, and first we build the bot cap skeleton because of the same landfill or items on top of landfill, but not both at the same time, and to extend the Roboport coverage. And then after that, we're able to build the full bot cap. The exact same blueprint is duplicated at the top as well. This is because this entire process is a loop that continuously loops, and I have to break it up somewhere in the loop. And the only difference between these two is the coordinates for the top is different than the bot, because the loop iterator will have changed. And that covers the what of logic thread number 1. Basically, it just adds all of the support structures required, the top cap, the bot cap, and the rail straightaways. If we jump all the way to the last one, number 11, this one removes some of these support structures. And the primary reason for removing these structures is the UPS cost. And the most important one that we already discussed is the train stop limitation. So these two remove train stops. And then in the caps, we have a bunch of combinators. And if we continuously add another 50 or so combinators per every cap, that's going to get out of hand really quickly. And while we're at it, we remove some of the buffers as well to just recycle them back into the system. This leaves logic threads number 2 through 10 to actually construct the solar field itself. And these 9 logic threads are the solution to the steel paradox. In the Mark I variant, we had the one big beautiful blueprint, which had about 25,000 solar panels, 20,000 accumulators, 1,000 substations, 60,000 landfill, 20,000 debris, and 2 active SpiderTrains, meaning there could be up to 250,000 ghost entities and tasks in the world at any given moment, which is fantastic for automation because it's literally a one-click solution, or I should say a shift-click solution. So it does require 2 button presses. Careful not to strain yourself. The consequence of that is that the speed is actually still decently fast, but still not fast enough. The solution is that we have to break up the big beautiful blueprint. And we first do this via task separation into 5 categories: landfill, deforestation, power and cliffs, accumulators, and solar panels. But from there, we do lane separation. Remember when we went through all the trains, we went left, right, spacer, left, right, spacer, left, right, spacer. That's the lane separation. Furthermore, we do a time separation. We segment the time into quarters. So we're going to take our big beautiful blueprint and divide it up into 33 individual blueprints so that at any given moment there's fewer ghost entities and tasks in the world. The downside of that is the automation, because then we have to paste 33 times more blueprints, except that's why we're using the blueprint deployers, because now we can automate it. So if we look at logic thread number 2, it is handling landfill left Q1 through 4. And the outer loop is the left lane separation, and the inner loop is the time separation. So the outer loop loops over the column from which we get our x coordinate from, These are the outer loop trigger conditions. This is the outer loop detector. This is the outer loop counter, the memory unit. And this is the outer loop translator for the conditions. And then this is the outer loop X offset value. So then we take that one full column and divide it up into quarters to get our inner loop. So we have our timer conditional, our inner loop detector, our inner loop counter, the memory unit, and then our inner loop Y offset value. And then we need to reset the inner loop every time we do an outer loop. So this is almost what we want, except that the trains snake up and down, they don't restart at the top every time. So we have to add a interloop index offset value, which is this, in order to get the snaking blueprint placement. These are the global isolator offset values, these are the loop isolator offset values, and these are the local offset values, which means in total, we end up with 30 combinators just to support this one blueprint deployer. Logic thread number 3 will be handling landfill right, Q1 through 4. Number 4 will handle deforestation left, Q1 through 4. Number 5 will be deforestation right, Q1 through 4. Number 6 is the power and cliffs, which is small enough that we don't subdivide it. 7 is accumulators left, Q1 through 4. 8 is accumulators right, Q1 through 4. 9 is solar panels left, Q1 through 4. And logic thread number 10 is solar panels right, Q1 through 4. And now finally, I've covered the entire purpose of the CPU itself, the main memory, the CAP's transmitting and receiving system, the purpose of the CAPs themselves, and the organization of all of these SpiderTrains. In my mind, this was a quick 15-minute explanation. I forgot how much there was to it, though. Anyways, we still got another 3.3 million solar panels to place down, so you know what time it is. This is what 10 million solar panels looks like. This section is the 2 million placed by the SpiderTrain Mark 1, and this section is the 8 million placed via the SpiderTrain Mark 2. As always, there is an asterisk here, and this time it's the defect rate. In the Mark 1 variant, I was manually moving SpiderTrains over the solar field, which means every time I saw a defect, I just had the SpiderTrain double back over it to fix it, which means there is a 0% defect rate in the Mark 1 variant. However, In the Mark II area, the entire thing is automatic, so there will exist some non-zero defect rate. This section though is an anomaly, as I do have 3 full blue belts of landfill coming in, and the amortized rate of landfill usage is about 1.5 blue belts. The problem is that there are some really high peaks that require more than 3 blue belts of landfill at a time. I'm sure there'll never be a pizza slice that's more than 33% wet, so it was bound to happen at some point. The good news is that it only happened once, and it was able to fully self-recover afterwards. So I'm just going to go ahead and repair it all and not include it in the defect rate because this was a planned failure state of the system. I decided not to add more landfill supplies. Either way, it was only a few thousand solar panels and accumulators, which in the grand scheme of things is completely negligible. To get the actual defect rate, I can set a deconstruction filter to ghost tiles and ghost entities, and then in the editor, just hover over the entire section. And after a bit of lag, and it actually crashed. I think this is the first time I've ever seen Factorio crash, which is totally fair and not their fault in this case. So let's go ahead and try this again. This time only selecting half of the solar field at once, which gives us 63 landfill ghosts, 7 solar panel ghosts, and 7 accumulator ghosts, and notably 0 substation ghosts, which is actually the same value I got just before crashing. A task failed successfully. Compared to our goal of 21 million landfill, 8.3 million solar panels, 7.3 million accumulators, and 350,000 substations, this is really good because it gives us 5 to 6 nines of success. To put this into perspective, say you had a service running continuously for a year. If you had 6 nines of reliability, that means it would only be down for half a minute every year. By my metrics, this is absurdly good. Almost a little too good.
I'm in danger!
By just enabling the electrical grid in the map view, we can easily spot more defects where substations have not been placed down. And in this case, there are 28 solar panels and 16 accumulators that have been successfully placed down. However, they don't work because there is no substation connecting them up to the greater electrical network. So all of these entities have to be marked as defects. The 5 skipped substations gives us another 132 defective solar panels and another 88 defective accumulators. Stop me if you heard this one before, but in 1.1, you can either place landfill or items on top of landfill, but not both at the same time. This requires 4 distinct steps where you ghost the landfill, and then place the landfill, and then ghost the building on top of the landfill, and then place that building. The first possible error state occurs when the building is ghosted, but never placed. We've already identified these errors by just selecting ghosts over the entire solar field. Another error state is when the landfill is ghosted, but is never actually placed, which means the building that is supposed to go on top of it is never ghosted and never placed. The locations of this happening have already been identified by all of the ghost landfill. However, I have to go to every individual ghost landfill and count up how many buildings it is blocking. And in total, the 63 landfill ghosts blocked 28 solar panels and 4 accumulators. But there's another failure state that has no ghost representation so far, which is the never ghosted category. This is where the landfill is ghosted, but never placed, meaning the building is never ghosted. But later on, the landfill is placed by a caboose spider, meaning it was fixed, but it was fixed too late because the landfill wasn't placed before the buildings on top of it was ghosted. The problem with this error is that it's invisible to the ghost selection because there are no ghosts. So the only way to detect these errors is to modify the logic threads to loop over the entire solar field again and replace all of the building blueprints, and then go back and select all ghosts over the entire solar field again, resulting in another 95 solar panels and 34 accumulators. This brings the total number of defects to 63 landfill, 262 solar panels, 133 accumulators, and 5 substations, which is actually still really good. And if I do an overall success rate, it's actually really close to 5 nines, which means the SpiderTrain does indeed work. Or does it? Because the other part of the equation is how fast were these solar panels placed down?
I'm in danger!
You should know by now, it's never actually that simple. First here, it wasn't 10 million solar panels, it was 10.3 million solar panels. When building the solar printer, I was so preoccupied with getting the SpiderTrain to work that I never considered, once it is working, how do I get it to gracefully stop working?
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
In order to get this nice stack of trains at the end, I had to disable the PTC. You know, the thing that's preventing the trains from crashing into each other. Which means, as soon as I disabled it, the trains started to crash into each other. It ended up being so much more complicated than I ever expected. I had to add a end limiter, a fill limiter, and then I had to add a final lane placer with its own positional and coordinal data based off of the end limiter, a fill limiter, and then I had to weigh myself off of the PTC so I didn't have to just turn it all off or all on. Also, I could get a system that automatically and gracefully stopped itself. But by the time I figured this all out, I was already 300,000 solar panels over the original goal, which at this scale is actually just a rounding error. Next up is the 138 hours. Where did this value come from, and why is it wrong? 3 times over. This value comes from the Buildings tab, where we have to zoom all the way out to 250 hours, where we can see the distinct Mark I era, which lasted 38 hours, and the Mark II era that lasted 100 hours. This makes the 138 hours the total in-game time. So the Mark I variant took 38 hours to place 2 million solar panels, resulting in 877 solar panels per minute, whereas the Mark II variant took 100 hours to place 8.3 million solar panels, resulting in a rate of 1,383 solar panels per minute. In conclusion, the Mark II variant is about 60% better than the Mark I variant. And just like that, analysis complete, right? It's that simple, right? If we zoom in a bit more than 250 hours and pick an optimal time, we can measure the sustained peak rate. That is, with no interruptions, what is the rate of solar panel placement? For the Mark I variant, this is about 1.1k solar panels per minute, although the Mark I variant is inconsistent. That's kind of the problem. I have to manually tab back in every 15-20 minutes to place the next set of solar panels down. Where the Mark II variant is supposed to be automatic, which means for this 50-hour section with 0 human intervention, it was able to consistently sustain a 1.6k solar panels per minute. However, in total, there were 7 human interventions, and you can directly see these 7 halts in the zoomed out 250-hour graph. If we go ahead and compare the sustained peak rates, the Mark II variant is only about 36% better than the Mark I variant. This is because the human gap, or the manual part of the Mark I variant, cost about 20%. However, there's still this manual 8% gap that happens in the automatic Mark II variant. So I showed this before, where I assumed it was always at the sustained peak rate, and I went, how long would it take to to place all 10 million solar panels. And for the Mark I variant, this would be about 6.3 days, and for the Mark II variant, this would be about 4.3 days. And then I went ahead and said, I'm only going to play the game for 12 hours a day, resulting in a human tax. However, the inverse is true for the Mark II variant, as I'm only going to be not using my computer for 12 hours a day. Basically, I can only have it run overnight. This is where the second asterisk comes in, as essentially you have to double this time. This is also why just 7 errors resulted in such a large time gap, because I wasn't there to fix the errors. I wouldn't notice them until the next morning, which, depending when they happened during the night, could easily be 10 plus hours of wasted time. But there was another compounding problem on top of this, in that every reduction in frames is also a reduction in the number of updates, which is effectively slowing down the rate of time. In the Mark I variant, this was caused by quote-unquote work, or the fact that I am in fact using the computer while I'm having Factorio run in the background. Then there was the fact that zooming all the way out causes the renderer to actually eat up a measurable amount of frames, plus recording it isn't free. And of course, oil and water doesn't mix. And by oil and water, I mean SpiderTrons and solar fields do not mix. And I mean literally, they do not mix. The problem is that for every frame, as in every update, the spider legs have to be placed on the ground, which means the game has to figure out where on the ground those spider legs need to be placed. And a solar panel takes up a 3x3 grid. The legs can only be placed on the perimeter of this 3x3 area. They can't be placed anywhere in the center. So when a spider is traversing through a solar field, where each of these legs can be placed is actually quite limited. And I have a quote from the devs themselves. The most obvious performance problem with SpiderTrons happened when they navigated over obstacles, like solar panels. In 1.1, you can observe a noticeable slowdown by commanding a squad of SpiderTrons, you meant to say cluster, to cross a wide river. In some saves, as few as 10 SpiderTrons could affect UPS.
I'm in danger!
In this example, I had all 4 Mark I SpiderTrons traversing through the solar field at the same time, and they take up the entire allotted update time just to figure out where to place all of these spider legs. Thus, SpiderTrons and solar fields do not mix. They are oil and water, and if you do mix them together, it's going to cost you a bunch of frames. So that's the additional frame cost profile of the Mark I variant. However, the Mark II variant looks a bit different. This is because there is no work tax, because I'll be running this at night, so I won't be doing anything else with my computer. However, the map view tax goes up. Something about having all of these solar panels viewed from the map causes a pretty significant slowdown in the renderer and or the prep renderer. While usually these aren't an issue, they too can bleed into the update time, causing a time slowdown. To peel back the curtain a little bit, these time lapses are a little bit of editor magic, because the fewer solar panels in view, the faster the renderer is. So while recording, I tried to only keep the first few columns in view and hiding the rest of the solar panels off screen, which means when you see the full time lapse, the view isn't moving, meaning I have to kind of cheat in the right edge of solar panels. So it is real, I did do this, but there's a little bit of editing magic happening here, simply just to save some time. Recording it still eats up a few extra frames. The oil and water issue, or the spider legs and solar panel issue, still requires a decent chunk of the update time. However, since we're now going in perfectly straight lines, because the rails are perfectly straight, the legs have an easier time of finding the next available space in a perfectly straight line, because it happens to be just the next space in that line. And at this rate, it doesn't overwhelm and bubble over the update time. It is contained to within the update time, so it's not an issue anymore. In total, we went from an estimated time of 21 days in the Mark I variant to 10 days in the Mark II variant. And how long did it actually take? I actually don't know. I didn't really count, but it took about 2 weeks, about 14 days. However, it's almost a complete non-issue. It's a non-comparison to begin with because the Mark II variant is automatic and I just have it run overnight. So who cares how many nights it takes to run?
Good one. We're at max supply, so no.
Now that the side quest of 10 million solar panels is complete, I need to clean up all of the messes it made, like moving all of these SpiderTrains back to the main base. Lucky for me, there's a convenient 1.6 million tile long train track, which goes all the way back to the main base. Uh-oh. Somebody forgot to do some math before they hit go. Using the max speed of the nuclear fuel, the duration of the fuel, and the number of slots, we can calculate the max distance a fully fueled train can travel, which is quite a bit short of the total track length, except that I made a double oopsies, because the track length is not 1.6 million meters long. The track length is 1.6 million track tiles long, and a rail track tile takes up 2 tiles, or 2 meters, meaning the actual track length is 3.2 million meters long. So this was never ever going to work. I'll just go ahead and reload the save and just go straight across this time. And now that I've laid the track down, I can bring the rest of the SpiderTrains over here. And the train part of the SpiderTrains follow the tracks themselves. The spiders just draw a straight line, which means they love to get stuck on water. I end up filling in this entire puddle just to allow the spiders to cross it. And now after 100 in-game hours, or probably more like a couple of months, the SpiderTrain is back where it started. But I actually want to move all these SpiderTrains back to the main base. These spiders should have been able to just simply cut through the solar field, except that they got stuck up here. And enough of them got stuck that it dropped the FPS all the way down to 9 updates per second. And this is because it's spending 100 milliseconds trying to figure out where to place all these spider legs that got stuck. Which means this simple move, which took 9 minutes in-game time, actually took an hour and a half of real-life time just to get from here to there. In the confined network of the solar printer, one of the jobs of the SpiderTrain itself is to place down the landfill so itself doesn't get stuck. But out here on the open railroads, you have to be really careful about going too fast around a corner, because it's not that the train will derail, but it's the spiders will get completely stuck. While waiting for some of these movements to happen, I went around and did some repairs to the solar field, as I just couldn't handle the fact that there were known defects there.
Self-destruct sequence initiated.
Now you got it, done it!
With the self-destruct capability of the caps, in order to finish the cleanup operation, all I have to do is a simple pass across, because there could have been items laying on the ground, and as we already discovered, items that are laying on the ground are completely nuke-proof.
You're being so uncooperative. All I'm asking you to do is make my machine work so I can invade and conquer your world and enslave your loved ones. Self-destruction? Self-destruct? Wait, that's it! I remember now! They took out my self-destruct button! I don't know why I put it back in, but here, I'll just rewire this, like so, and there! If I had a nickel for every time I was doomed, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
Now with the top and bot caps completely cleaned up, I can finally mark the major build of solar panels and accumulators as complete. The 700,000 tier 3 modules and 26 million blue belts are still resting in our mega dump storage, along with 5.5 million wooden boxes, because remember, the box is everything. Of the major builds, this only leaves the 4-core SPU, which is getting there. I ended up turning off the science while the solar printer was active. Even though itself is relatively UPS efficient, it still consumes a few updates, meaning when I was zoomed all the way out on the map view, I can actually make time go faster by disabling it. And so now that we're done, I'll turn it back on and let it pollute all over again. That takes care of all of the major builds. The minor builds are whatever, who cares, they're minor. And in the other category, we have 20 to 40 million landfill. And to place down the entire solar field, I used about 21 million landfill. So this should be complete now, which only leaves concrete. 50 to 100 million.
I'm in danger!
I actually completely forgot about this since it's been so long, but today's goal is to build the base's foundation. If you supply this with iron ore, stone, and water, it will supply one fully beaconed refined concrete building. We're gonna need about 40 of these.
What is my purpose?
You are the brood mother.
Oh my god.
This mining outpost is now in the way. Feels like a piece of history now though, as you can date an outpost based on how many miners it took to fill one blue belt. Here it was 10 to 1, or 10 miners per one blue belt. Now that it's all the way down to 1 miner per blue belt, we can move the new mines out of the way just over here. And we can do it with just 9 miners, a 10x reduction. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, does whatever a SpiderTrain does. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, does whatever a SpiderTrain does. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, do 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 do. SpiderTrain, oh SpiderTrain, what can't you do for me? Do 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 do.
All of this just works. I'm not kidding.
Of course, every proper factory needs a factory floor, and this factory floor is divided up into 29,000 sectors, where each sector is divided up into a 4x4 grid-aligned chunk. And of course, each sector has a label as well. This one is BO-34, as the labeling starts out at A1 and goes all the way to DZ64. There's so much room for activities here. The concrete printer was able to put down 136 million pieces of concrete in 158 hours. That's 14,000 concrete every minute, or 240 every second for 6 days, with a 0% defect rate, and only ever requiring a single manual intervention. This was only possible because the solar printer was effectively the beta tester of the concrete printer, as I could learn and improve from all of my previous mistakes. Starting with the cause and solution to the 7 manual interventions I had to do in the solar printer. We'll start by evaluating the first intervention, and I think I have a quote that describes the situation fairly well.
There is no amount of testing that could prepare me for the freak combinations of biters and terrain.
In this situation, the artillery SpiderTrain was going alongside a really long water feature. For reference, the artillery train is 144 cars long, and it's firing over the water into biters' nests. Since the biters brought mandibles to an artillery fight, and they also can't swim, this leaves them only 2 options to reach the SpiderTrain. Either go around to the front. I had anticipated the frontal assault, so I have additional security Spidertrons here, but they could also go around the other way to the caboose, which I did not anticipate and did not have extra security Spidertrons there. So the solution was to add additional security Spidertrons to the back, and then this was never an issue again. Manual intervention number 2. I have a quote for this one as well.
There is no amount of testing that could prepare me for the freak combinations of biters and terrain.
In this case, due to the water feature, there was a large attack wave at the front of the train, and while there were security Spidertrons, the problem is that they're too slow to get to the front of the train. So there are a few different solutions we can try, like speeding up the security spiders, except that they're already going as fast as they can because they already have 3 exoskeletons. Instead, we could try positioning the spiders further forward, except that we can't because they're already targeted to the lead locomotive, and you can't target beyond the front of the engine. You can only target to the sides, so this won't work, which only leaves the option of slowing down the train itself. Except we can't do this either, because then we'd slow down the entire solar printer, which means we'd slow down the solar panel placement rate. To further compound this issue, the artillery need extra time to search for biters, rotate towards biters, and then fire at the biters. And as I discussed on slide 30 of my C.R.A.P talk, in order to maintain the same base pace, but increase the amount of wait time, I scrunch all of the wait times into one stop, and then I skip a bunch of stops. But by skipping a bunch of stops in a row, the train accelerates, which makes it faster than any combination of spider legs possible. The train part of the SpiderTrain leaves the protective safety of the explosive reactive spiders for even longer. And there's nothing I can do about it. There is no solution. Manual intervention number 3 also has a quote.
There is no amount of testing that could prepare me for the freak combinations of biters and terrain.
This time, it's SpiderTrain number 2, and there's this little island in the middle of a water feature, which causes these biters to bunch up. And we have the same issue, even though we can see that the train itself is not that far ahead of the Spidertrons, because the water feature caused a bunching of biters. It's enough, and the train dies. There is also no solution. Manual intervention number 4. This time the bugs are evolving.
My armor is iron. My teeth are swords. My claws are spears. My wings are a hurricane.
Take your children, get out of here.
And go where? There is nowhere to go.
We're going to die, Dad.
No, darling.
The dragon, it's going to kill us.
Not if I kill it first.
Not much can stop a spider train, except a single piece of dirt can. If you have a chasm, and you put one piece of dirt tantalizingly close to one edge, and the other edge just a little bit further away, and a spider comes at just the perfect angle, it will become stuck there. This single piece of dirt becomes the perfect spider trap. But this doesn't actually stop the spider train, because to stop it, you have to stop the spiders, and you have to stop the train. But by stripping away the explosive reactive spider armor, you have now exposed a single weak point for which a biter attack wave can exploit.
You have nothing left but your death.
All it took to stop the entire solar printer was this little patch of dirt that was perfectly placed down, which stripped away one spider. Afterwards, the biters performed the perfect surgical strike, which attacked that exact location and killed one wagon, bringing the beast to a complete halt. The solution to this is that I added stepping stones to all of the exploratory rail placement. This way, no matter what the shape of the train is, there is a stepping stone close enough that allows the spider to continue navigating forward. And while this does add some additional burden to this lead spider train, realistically, it's not that much, because the entire vertical slice is not water, only a small portion of it is ever water. This was never an issue again. Manual intervention number 5 is a direct copy of manual intervention number 2. Same problem, frontal protection, same location, spider train number 3, and the same result, no solution. I have a quote that goes with manual intervention number 6.
There is no amount of testing that could prepare me for the freak combinations of biters and terrain. The 50-second timer I set works almost all the time, but even if it's a 1 in 1,000 chance, that still means it's going to happen 10 times before I'm finished.
I use very few passive signals to control these state machines, but I didn't eliminate all of them, and a passive signal is a timer that is estimating when the task is complete. When building the top cap, it builds it in 3 stages. First, the blanket deconstruct, then the skeleton, and then the final everything else. And the way it transitions between these stages is just a timer, a passive signal, estimating when it's ready for the next stage. And while I gave these pretty generous windows, we can see that the top cap just failed to place down a handful of track pieces. This of course occurred while building over water, because in 1.1 you can either build landfill or items on top of landfill, but not both at the same time. The solution is that we just repaste over this final blueprint a few more times. That's what these red wires are doing. When it reaches the next state, it also just pastes down the previous state as well, effectively widening the window at which it has to complete the task. And this was never an issue again. Finally, manual intervention number 7. Here, a few track pieces on landfill failed to get placed down, so SpiderTrain 1 failed to advance any further. This is because in 1.1 you can either place landfill or items on top of landfill, but not both at the same time. The solution is that we can just repaste down the straightaway again, and it'll work. The trigger to replace down the straightaway is done with just a timer, where empirically I know it should take about 18 minutes to go across, so that when the SpiderTrain leaves the cap, I can just set a timer for, say, 30 minutes, and if that SpiderTrain doesn't make it across to the next cap in 30 minutes, something has gone wrong, and I can just blindly repaste down the straightaway to see if that will have fixed it. And it did fix it, and it was never an issue again. As it turns out, I actually lied, because it wasn't 7 manual interventions, it was 8. Forgive me, but there's like 200 hours of footage on the timeline, and it's really hard to find any specific thing, and I missed one more manual intervention. But there's no surprise here that it's actually just a repeat, and a repeat of the frontal protection on SpiderTrain number 3. Also with the same issue of no solution. By going through this error list, I was able to fix up all of the issues, except for the frontal protection issues. SpiderTrain 1, 2, and 3 are in the danger zone, and all 3 of those trains that are in the danger zone require frontal protection. And I can put my Spider-Man themed child car seat in the back seat of one of those trains, and since I've been sitting in the lead SpiderTrain never actually broke down. However, the 2 that I weren't sitting in, SpiderTrain 2 and 3, did break down. So whichever 2 I don't sit in are going to have issues. The real problem here is that there is no solution. The only possible options are bring these spiders further forward, which I can't, or speed the spiders up, which I can't, or slow the train down, which I can't. I mean, I could slow the train down, but that's basically just admitting defeat, because it would just reduce the building placement rate. There truly is no solution. There is nothing I can do to maintain the same placement rate while increasing the frontal protection. We have finally hit the steel wall, as I've called it. I cannot make things go any faster, and to make it work, I kinda just need to make them go slower.
Unacceptable command.
Knowing that I have tweaked all the knobs and there's nothing left for me to do, I lost a lot of interest in building these SpiderTrains, and instead I just started playing Space Age. While Navis and Space Age and just 1.1 in general are essentially the same game, there's just so many little quality of life features in 2.0 that just make it such a better experience. And these quality of life features get really amplified when you go back to the old version and realize they're not there anymore. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but in 1.1 you can either place landfill or items on top of landfill but not both at the same time. But in 2.0, you can do them both at the same time.
Wow!
They also added the ability to look at and edit the combinators from the remote view. I don't have to spend 30 minutes traversing across the entire world just to edit one value.
So old school!
There's also the ability to see the values being sent to the combinator inside of the combinator, as opposed to 1.1, where you'd have to put a power pole next to it. Which is why there's so many freaking power poles, because it's literally the only way to view the values. Now when you use Control X to move combinators, if they can maintain the same connections, they will maintain the same connections when you place them down again.
Wow!
You now have the ability to adjust the absolute and relative values of blueprints by just pressing the arrow keys, instead of having to type in the exact offset coordinates.
Wow!
Did I mention that the standard rail block I'm using is 36 by 36, while the concrete grid is 4 chunks, or 128 by 128, meaning I have to have 32 different versions in order to have the pattern repeat, except that the concrete is divided into 4s, so I need 128 individual blueprint patterns in order to ensure this concrete pattern? That wasn't tedious at all.
So old school!
And then there's the most underrated one of them all, which is the fact that wires sag a little bit less, which makes the circuit contraptions easier to read, because now the wires draw a straighter line to what they're connecting between.
Wow!
Amongst the many improvements from 1.1 to 2.0, I realized 2.0 has the solution to my steel problem. It's been here the whole time. So I made a mod to port this 2.0 feature to 1.1 so that I could have my perfect SpiderTrains. Of course, this feature is the one thing I could not live without, the one thing that would solve my problem here, the one thing that I just couldn't play without anymore, the thing that is the most powerful in 2.0, which is of course legendary trains. I did it. I found the one use case for legendary trains.
They're not that OP.
Okay, but how does legendary trains help us with our frontal protection issue? When a spider is following a wagon, and then that wagon gets destroyed, the spider no longer has a valid follow target, so it just stands still where it is. By looking through our manual errors, we can see that the security Spidertrons ended up standing still pretty close to where the locomotives died. If the locomotives could have survived for an extra second or two, the security spiders would have been able to get there and protect it. And a legendary train has 2.5x HP, essentially meaning it can survive for 2.5 times longer, which is more than enough time for the security spiders to get there and save the day. After implementing the legendary train mod, the frontal protection issue was solved. This was never an issue again. The mod, of course, is 4 lines of code long, and the tutorial mod in the wiki has a template of how you can alter the health numbers.
Hacker Man. He's the most powerful hacker of all time.
With all of the issues from the solar printer resolved, this begs the question, what was that one manual error in the concrete printer? I was so close to having 0 defects, 0 manual interventions, but I made one stupid silly mistake because it was a new error that I haven't seen before, and that's because it was a configuration error. When having to adhere all 300 or so spiders to the train, I have to make sure that the spiders are following a point inside of the wagon, as in not to either side. However, for some spiders, I also have to make sure that they're following towards the front of the train, so that they go as far forward as possible. Like for this rail repair spider, which is here to repair any track in front of the train that might have gotten destroyed by biters. But as you can see, it's just a little too far back by like 1 or 2 pixels. It wasn't far enough forward to repair this single piece of track, meaning it halted the entire concrete printer, all because of this one stupid little configuration error. Oh, I was so mad when I saw that. Now with the factory floor installed, I consider the factory's foundation to be complete. Before leaving, I want to build the first ceremonial row of the bus, the 5,000 tile wide bus. This is the width of the bus, not the length of the bus. Each one of these is an individual lane on the bus, as it starts out at BP13 and goes all the way to BP52, which only leaves 12.5 sectors on each side for the actual factory. Uh-oh. Did I get my math wrong? Is the concrete pad too small? Oh god, I hope not. Oh no.